Good morning, everyone. As you may have heard, my name is Kimberlynn. I am an enrolled member of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, and I grew up in Wakpala, South Dakota, on the Standing Rock Indian Reservation. I'm sure you've all heard about Standing Rock and the protests as it was thrust into the national spotlight. But because there is much more to Standing Rock than just what the headlines have shown, I wanted to give you a more complete picture of the place where I grew up and explain some of the other less publicized challenges and opportunities that my community faces. On Standing Rock, health issues like diabetes and heart disease disproportionately affect the American Indian population. These diseases are brought on in part by lack of adequate nutrition. In fact, the United States Department of Agriculture designates Standing Rock, Pine Ridge, and Rosebud Sioux reservations as low-income and low-access food deserts. The counties within these reservations are also among the poorest counties in both North and South Dakota. While poverty is prevalent on the reservation, there is also a significant lack of adequate and available housing. Sometimes you have up to 3 to 4 families living in a single home. The cost of living can be high on the reservation. With South Dakota's extreme weather conditions in the winter months, it is not hard to imagine the large amount of energy needed to keep poorly insulated houses within the communities warm. With money tight, many families need additional funding to help offset these energy needs. Families can typically spend 30 to 40% of their annual income on housing, which is 3 to 4 times the rate of what the national percentage is to be considered to be in poverty in terms of spending on energy, which is 10%. So that's a huge difference. And growing up, seeing my family struggle as a child, I thought to myself, there just has to be a better way to heat our homes that doesn't cost so much. It has been an idea that has never left me. And today I stand here as an Ocheti Shagomi Solve Fellow who is developing a multifaceted systemic solutions approach to address the need for a sustainable community scale housing initiative, as well as to develop a year-round net zero greenhouse operation for economic growth that utilizes the tribe's renewable energy resources to offset our commercial and residential energy demands. Currently, I am a graduate student at South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, and I am studying sustainable tribal community development. South Dakota is the perfect setting for such creative thinking. The high winds that move freely across both North and South Dakota prairies provide a considerable and largely untapped wind energy resource, in addition to underdeveloped geothermal and solar resources. There is huge potential for renewable energy on Standing Rock, as well as economic development. And it is my vision to bridge who we are as a Native people with the renewable technologies that are within our grasp to preserve our culture and create a sustainable future for our people. I truly believe that the Native relationship with the land is one that is respectful and reciprocal. If we take care of the land will take care of us. Please join me now in welcoming to the stage a panel of impressive young activists who I am sure share in my belief. Malua Bulker, Executive Director of the African Youth Action Network. Brianna Fruin, climate activist for the Pacific Climate Warriors in 350 Samoa. Amira Ode, organizer for the Caribbean Youth Environment Network. And their moderator, Dr. Malika Marshall, health reporter, CBS Boston. We'll see you later.
Hello, MIT. I am so excited to be here. First of all, I just have to tell you that I have a 9-year-old daughter whose dream is to come to MIT. She calls it ATM because she's only 9 and she can't remember MIT. And I said, but honey, maybe you could go to Harvard like your mom did. And she goes, I only want to go to the best, Mom. So I am thrilled to be here at the best institution in this area. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited for you to hear what these young people have to say. And when I say young, I mean young. They range in age from 19 to to 27. I'm not going to tell you who's what, but they are doing some incredibly impressive things with their lives, and I think should give all of us confidence that the future of our planet is a bright one. So I want to start by having each of you tell me a little bit about where you're from and what specific challenges you are having to face in that particular region of the world. Who should we start with? Brianna?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Talofa lava. My name is Brianna Fruin. I'm from the island of Samoa. The island, not the cookie. I can get confused sometimes in America. A couple of people in Boston have asked me where I'm from, and they haven't quite solved that yet. In the Pacific, the biggest issue of our generation and of our time is climate change. So we're a lot of small islands with big oceans, and sea level rise, increased cyclones and extreme weather, increased flooding, drought, and food security is a big issue in the Pacific. There's a village that's next to mine in Samoa, and there's a walkway through a mangrove, and it's been there for years, and that's how the kids walk to school. And that has become completely underwater, making it harder for the kids. They've just rebuilt it. But I went there recently before I came to Boston, and I was speaking to an old man from the village, and he was saying, boy, I hope this walkway lasts your generation, and I hope that it can last the generation after yours. And I said, do you think it will? And he looked at me, I don't think it will. So sea level rise, climate change is the biggest issue in my region. Thank you, Tai.
Thank you. Malual?
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Malual Bolkir. I'm from South Sudan. And the biggest issue that we are facing right now is the ongoing conflict, which make us forget about some of the biggest issues as well, which includes climate and economic hardships, which led many of my people to flee to a neighboring country. So it's good to meet you here, and I will be happy to share some of the things that we do regarding the conflict and the climate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amira. I'm from Puerto Rico, the most beautiful place in the world, non-biased opinion. Over there, as you probably may have heard on the news recently, we're having a lot of issues right now. And we have all these issues related to climate change, like the ones Brianna mentioned, together with issues caused by our input and austerity measures, which when it comes to the environment, it translates to like waste issues because there's no waste management or no recycling, and it translates to natural and preserved lands being sold to pay the national debt. And in general, a lack of education and a lack of action towards climate and energy issues, just because the focus on the island right now is like how we're gonna survive today, how are we gonna make money and boost our economy right this instant. So it's like a lot of thinking about what's happening right today instead of looking forward to how can we build for the future.
Brianna, let me go back to you for a moment. You're very young, but I heard that you have sort of started this environmental push 11 years ago. So you started at a very, very, very young age, and you have continued to want to recruit and encourage other young people in your country to sort of become activists and to care about environmental issues and to help protect the area and protect that mangrove walk. What sort of things have you been using to try to reach out to other young people? What has been the most successful and what has been the most challenging for you?
Definitely. I think the most successful way to reach out to young people is really finding connection with them and really finding other young people who have modeled leadership and really introducing them and showing that, you know, you're never too young to do something. You're never too young to pursue bigger dreams. You're never too young to change the world. And also, speaking in a language that our young people can understand. A big tool for us in our environmental groups is social media. being able to use, the internet, being able to use our technology as a useful tool to combat things like climate change, being able to connect someone from Samoa to maybe someone from Puerto Rico and seeing the similarities and the issues that they're facing, and maybe modeling some of the solutions that they have used in their region that could maybe be used in your own.
And forgive me if you don't know, but what is the population of Samoa? How many people are we talking about?
It's close to 200,000.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's still relatively small.
Yeah.
Compared to other regions, but is a large segment of the population young people? Is it a pretty young population?
It's a pretty young population, and I feel like a lot of our young people are starting to recognize that climate change is a big issue. So I feel like in the Pacific and in Samoa, the big population of our youth are going to be the ones that really push for climate justice.
And as a young person, I remember being young and not worrying so much about health. I mean, here we're specifically talking about the effects of climate change on the health of our planet, but also on the health of our people. Is that helpful when you go to talk to young people to talk about increasing rates of asthma or, increasing risk of infectious diseases, or is that sort of, that's for old people to talk about? Is that a way to connect with them, or is that falling on deaf ears?
I feel like it will be helpful, but it is difficult at first because right now people don't make the instant connection between health and climate change. Although it is very interconnected, I feel like when addressing your average population, you have to start with language that they will be captivated with. When I speak to people, I always start with stories. I think stories is a beautiful message to send to the world. I think a lot of the time people can be caught up in the science or the politics of climate change and science and politics of health. But when you really start to paint the picture of the human faces behind these issues, I feel people are more captivated. I heard a story once that has stuck with me throughout all my work, was from a friend from Kiribati who said that when the king tides hit in her atoll, they put their babies in buckets. So the women in the village will go around and start to put their babies in buckets because there's nowhere else for them to go. And for her to be able to paint that image for me, it really stuck with me as the face of climate change. Because a lot of people ask that, what is climate change? What does climate change look like? And ever since I heard that story, when someone asks me, what does this science or political talk look like? It looks like the faces of the aunties and the mothers and the uncles and the cousins who are affected by climate change. So I feel like when you're trying to push a message or you're trying to connect with people, the first point of connection is always our stories and our frontline truths.
And that's so true. I mean, as a health reporter, I always want to find a face of a story that I'm doing, right? You want to find that patient who is being affected by whatever illness or treatment you're talking about, because that's the way that you're able to connect with the audience. So you have tapped into probably one of the most effective ways to touch people and to get their attention is to sort of make them visualize it and personalize it for them. So that's great. Malual, you call yourself a 2-time climate refugee. I want you to explain a little bit what that means. And then I also want you to talk about the challenges. Like, you're dealing with so many challenges, not just climate change in Sudan, but political violence and economic hardship. How do you tease those out, and how do you get the focus on climate change, get the attention that it deserves?
Thank you so much. It's true, we have a lot of challenges that we face as we are called the youngest nation in the world. But the major problem that we have is of course, the political violence that have been, with us for like 5 decades. We have been in a conflict for 5 decades. And, I've been working with young South Sudanese after I founded the African Youth Action Network, which was founded as a call to action by youth toward peaceful, healthy, and transformed societies. And we realized that climate issues also is a sort of one of the issues which lead to the conflict, especially over the resources, because the challenges that we face in South Sudan, we have the political violence, we have the rise of the temperature, and even the rain. It has been raining for some good months, but now even like for 4 months, we could not have rain for 4 months, and the streams have really dried up. So in South Sudan, 95% of the South Sudanese depend on climate-sensitive sectors like agriculture, like fisheries, forestry resources for sort of livelihoods. And in all that, there have been a lot of challenges. When you look at the areas in South Sudan which has dried up, so the pastoralists will be moving from one place to another looking for pastures, and that creates a conflict between them and the agriculturalists, the farmers. So from there, we've been trying to work with South Sudanese young people and different communities within South Sudan and the refugees to understand that the climate issues is also a very big issue, because there's indiscriminate cutting down of trees in South Sudan for firewood or construction or a lot of stuff. So the work that we have been doing is more of creating awareness that also climate issue is a problem. And no matter that, despite the fact that we are focusing so much on political violence, we need to put it into our mind. We've been creating more awareness that climate is a real issue, and it's something that we also need to concentrate and put our focus on.
So they're all interrelated, right? Because the fewer resources you have, the more people are going to fight for those resources, and the more violence there likely is to be, and the more political unrest and upheaval. But I'm sort of sensing a theme here, that it's really the young people that you guys are turning to for help. Because what? Because the old fogies like me are like they don't hear it, or they have more urgent things or pressing things to worry about. Why the emphasis on the young people?
Thank you so much. The emphasis is on young people because we have realized that the old folks don't care.
So the old fogies don't care.
So they don't care. That's why they are letting our country where it is right now. So if we look at South Sudan, it has what is called the worst humanitarian crisis in Africa. And it's the old folks which caused that. So we wanted to tap in as young South Sudanese to create a difference in our own country and in the continent at large. Because the problem in South Sudan is not more of a South Sudanese problem right now. It's become a regional issue. Because we have, for example, in Uganda alone, we have 1.4 million South Sudanese refugees, and we have other million South Sudanese refugees in other neighboring countries like Kenya, Democratic Republic of Congo, Central African Republic, Sudan, and Ethiopia. So understanding climatic issues in the areas where refugees are, it's also sort of creating a social cohesion between the refugees and the hosting communities. Because I've been to the refugee camps in northern Uganda, and the conflict has always been that, the hosting communities have always been saying the refugees are cutting down trees. Because the refugees are very poor, they couldn't afford maybe to buy charcoal or stove or whatever it is, so they resort to cutting down of trees. And that sort of also create a conflict between the hosting communities and the refugees communities. So we understand that now that the old folks have destroyed the country and have led the country to where it is, so we need to sort of nurture ourselves as a young people to grow up with, positive minded, as people who want to create, who wanted to build a better South Sudan to create, better tomorrow for all the South Sudanese and for all Africans within the region.
Just so you know, that's a global problem, right? Even here in the United States, the old people are messing things up, right? So we're turning to the young people. We're turning to you all for help. Amira, so tell us a little bit about your experience specifically with Hurricane Maria and how it affected you and your family and your efforts to sort of network, again, with young people, right? And how it might have affected your ability to use social media to try to reach out to other youngsters.
Sure, thank you. So Hurricane Maria impacted me in a way that I never thought it was possible. I knew since I was super young that I knew that climate change was gonna get to me eventually. And I read all these horror stories about communities being affected by climate change and how it was gonna look like, but I never thought it was gonna get to me that way. And it's very shocking and impactful to like not only live that stress of being like a whole day and a half with winds and rain and seeing everything flying all around your house and being scared for your life, but also seeing the destruction after and finding myself thinking like, I don't know if I'm gonna have food tomorrow. I don't know if I'm gonna have water tomorrow. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to leave the country and be able to save my grandmother's life because there's no medical assistance, there's no communications. What am I gonna do? And finding myself there, I was thinking like, well, this is what climate change is going to look like. Maybe not this one storm is climate change, but all scientists know that this is what's going to keep happening more and more and stronger. And that made me realize that, like, I always knew it was something urgent, but it's given me a real human face to how this problem happens and who is really affected by it, and just seeing my country destroyed and seeing the places I've lived there for more than 25 years and seeing them unrecognizable, it totally changed my way of seeing the world and how the system is happening right now and how we need to solve it.
How are things now for your immediate family and for your community?
Well, we have power and water, and that's usually what like people think it's like okay, and like okay, it's solved. You have power back, but it's not like
and
that.
And it took how many months for you to get?
For me, it took me 2 months, and I live in the city. There's still people in the mountains and in coastal areas that don't have power or water, and it's not just that. It's like having a job, having a stable life. Every week or so, I have a different friend tell me like, okay, I don't find hope for me here anymore. I have to leave. And when everyone you care about leaves your home, like, is it home anymore? Does it matter for you to stay there? So we're not only fighting for climate issues, we're fighting for our loved ones and everything we care about. And to try and put my part to solve that, right the day after the hurricane, I went to the roof of my house and I saw that all the trees that have been there for decades, they weren't there anymore. And I went to the supermarket and I found it empty, and that had me thinking, how am I gonna eat tomorrow? How is everyone gonna eat tomorrow? And through that, I started planning a reforestation project that's focusing on food security. So we have, since December, we have started to visit different communities around Puerto Rico, giving seeds and fruit trees to families who lost their backyard gardens, who lost their family orange trees or their mango trees, and try to have everyone like plant food in their backyards. So whenever another emergency like this occurs, we can have something. We don't have to depend on the airports to open or the ports to open and the ships to bring in aid.
Was that frustrating for you and for your community to have aid arrive so slowly and not enough, so insufficiently?
Yeah, and for example, I never got aid. Most people never got aid. Aid was really needed in impoverished communities, and they needed the most help. But also, like, middle class, average people didn't have access to the supermarket. We didn't want to go steal the aid from the people who needed it. But we also found ourselves thinking, hey, like, I'm thirsty too, and I'm hungry too. how can I access this? And it was just very stressful in general. You want to be fair, but you're also worried about your own health and your own life.
Would you have considered yourself an environmental activist before the hurricane?
Yeah.
You had already.
Yeah, totally.
You had already done
like
that.
since
So-
my first memories, I've been an activist. When I was 5 years old, I wrote a letter to the mayor complaining that he was like paving a road and taking dogs away from a local park.
Taking dogs away from a local park.
Ducks. Yeah,
Ducks.
yeah. I like to
Taking the ducks away.
look at the
You like to see the
duckies,
ducks.
and yeah, he took
Yeah.
them away from me.
And duck poop is just a normal way of
Yeah.
life. Like, who cares about the poop, right? Did the mayor write you back?
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
And?
He would say like, oh, you're just trying to stop the traffic. It's gonna be okay. I'm gonna bring the dogs back.
And you
then
never
he
saw them
did.
again.
No.
Okay, so this has been your life's work from
Yeah.
a very early age, and now you have this devastating storm hit your island. How has that, I mean, you've already sort of talked about this reforestation project and donating seeds and plants, which is wonderful. Is it going to change your course long term, you think, in terms of what you do and how you advocate for Puerto Rico and for climate change in general?
Yeah, totally. For years, I've been focused mostly on plastic waste issues and overall, like stopping fossil fuel industry issues. But finding myself hungry and thirsty had me thinking about food security. So for the past few months, and I've also been planning projects for the upcoming years. I want to focus also on food security. In Puerto Rico, we currently import more than 85% of our food, and even more after all the crops were destroyed because of the hurricane. So I want to change that.
I just want everybody here to realize what all of you had to go through to get here. Brianna, you traveled for how many hours? For
Almost 1.5 days, almost 2 days. Yeah.
2 days to get here, and she leaves. So she's got here. We got yesterday, and you have to leave tomorrow. And then I know it wasn't as far from Puerto Rico, but Malual, tell them what you had to do. You couldn't just hop on a plane in South Sudan and end up in Boston. What did you have to do to get here?
Have to go to Uganda because we can't process U.S. visas, number one, in South Sudan because of the ongoing crisis. So we process the visas outside South Sudan. And I had to go to Uganda. From Uganda, I processed my
But you had to
visas.
spend a couple of weeks in Uganda to do
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah,
Okay. And then to Istanbul, and then...
Then Istanbul, it was like 6 hours from Uganda to Istanbul and 10 hours from Istanbul to here. So it's a long way.
So I just want them to appreciate the sacrifice that you've made and the dedication. Okay, we don't... we only have a few more minutes. And with those few more minutes, I want each of you all to think, this is the way they've worded it, one most outrageous, creative, cool, or exciting solution to some of the challenges that we've discussed today. The bolder, the better. So if you could think completely outside of the box, what would you love to be able to do to make a difference? It's a tough question, I know. But if you could do anything, if you had unlimited resources or you had a really neat tool that you could tap into, what would it be?
Unlimited resources.
Okay, that's probably not fair since we're talking about limited resources. Okay, maybe not totally unlimited resources, but something that if you had a chance, you think like this would make a huge difference for either you or your community or for the planet. Yeah.
I think something that would be really great for not just the Pacific, but for small islands is a way for people willing to donate post-disaster to be able to connect directly with the communities that need what they need. So instead of going through like big donors, big governments, that there's a way to connect an average person in America to an average person in Samoa that needs assistance, and someone in Samoa to be able to say, this is what I need, and for someone on the other side of the world to be like, okay, I'm gonna get this to you.
like a GoFundMe type page or a way to connect individuals?
Yeah, a way to connect individuals with not just funding as like monetary, but also like donations. We get a lot of unnecessary donations sometimes after like a cyclone, like blankets and winter jackets that aren't useful for us,
Right.
you know? So
But they figure you've been through a cyclone, you must need a jacket.
all it's doing is filling our landfill. So
And sometimes you need diapers or,
Yes,
or underwear or other sort of basic provisions
there
that
are
people might
things
be
that are
able to.
forgotten. And I feel like it's forgotten because it is going to such a big scale of donors or governments. But when it's brought down to the average person, I feel like you'll be able to get more detailed and the needs are able to be met.
And you know people want to help. They don't know what to do. And sometimes all they can think to do is give money, right? Because they don't know how to do what you're
do that.
talking about. That's a great idea.
Connection.
Yeah, thank you.
I love how he thanks me after every question.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So it's a very tough and complex question because the issues that we are dealing with are so big that we can't solve them with only one solution because they are sort of mixed and interrelated issues. But if there's one thing I could do is to make my people understand that climate issues is a real threat to their country, to the continent, and to the world. Because we've been so ignorant about the climate issues. The government even, doesn't know, they don't care, like I've said earlier, about the threat of climate. They keep burning bushes every day, thinking that they're scaring away the rebels. Because there are a lot of 14 different armed groups in the country, so they keep burning, bushes every day. The rebel on the same side keep cutting down the trees, the bamboo trees, and sell them on the neighboring countries for resources. And there is no management because people don't know about the real threat of climate. We majorly depend on, on climate-sensitive sectors, like I've said earlier. And one of the things that we also face is because our country, the biggest resource in the country is the oil. So you realize that with the ignorance of the climate issues, even now that they spill out of the oil mixed with the water, and people drink the water and people die. So there's a need to, to create more awareness and to make people understand, the people of South Sudan, the government of South Sudan, that climate issue is real and it's a threat to them and to the world.
Perfect. Amira.
I'm stuck on the unlimited resources.
She just wants resources.
But if I had unlimited resources, I would go out into every single community and train everyone. Training is one of the things I've dedicated a lot of my time to, and in grassroots organizing training. And
Train them to do what?
to organize in their communities to bring clean energy, to install recycling, to stop plastic waste, to have clean water, to ask the government, the old folks that don't care about, to do something, like to show people power. A lot of times people don't realize the power that they have and the pressure that they can put on these old folks that don't care to solve issues. I've had so many people approach me and say, hey, I want to solve this problem in my community, but I just can't. I don't know how. I don't have any talents. And yes, they do. Everyone has power. Everyone has talents. And everyone needs to be empowered and realize that they can make a difference in this world.
And there is power in numbers, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
learned that here in the United States from the Parkland shootings, that if you can get a mass of people to continue to beat the drum that something must be done, those old people will eventually have to listen, even if they don't want to. All right, thank you guys so much for being here. This was a really interesting, provocative panel. Really appreciate it.